Hi, my name's Stuart Lynch, and in this video, I'd like to do two things. I want to fix a number of bugs that were discovered and reported during the creation of the first 8 videos in this series. And I also want to show you how you can store images in your database and make sure that they are also stored in the CloudKit store so that you can view your content and have it synced over multiple devices. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. When I was a teacher back in the 70s and 80s, every time I made a mistake, I used to say that I did it on purpose and that I just wanted to see if you were paying attention. Well, it appears that a lot of you were paying attention to my videos and have found some bugs in the code for this SwiftData series. Full disclosure, I didn't do it on purpose, and I'm thankful that many of you reached out to me in YouTube comments to let me know. My code, and likely yours, will always have bugs, and you can improve, so you can help someone else by pointing it out to them when you find theirs. Every one of the comments I had was respectful and helpful, so for that I'm grateful. No sleepless nights agonizing over that one snarky comment. So if you ever discover bugs in any of my code, leave me a comment, and I'll try to resolve it and at least post and pin a comment. Now, since you can't update a YouTube video without replacing it and creating an entirely new URL, the best way to deal with this is to create a video fixing the bugs. So before I get into showing you how you can add an image to your SwiftData and CloudKit store, let's deal with those bugs. Now, if you don't care about those fixes, and you're just here for the storing images section, use the link in the description down below in the table of contents to jump directly to that part of the code. If you're following along with me, you can continue on with your project from video 8. If not, then please download the completed project from the correct branch for this project's repository, and that's the 8th video CloudKit branch. I'll leave a link in the description. For this video, I've started a new branch for bug fixes and storing images. This first bug was identified by Yuri, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his last name. Apologies for that. Yuri discovered that there was a bug in my onDelete function in the quotes list view. He correctly identified that the deletion was deleting from the sorted array and not from the original array, so an incorrect quote could be deleted. Well, the solution is to, within the for each loop of the index set, to first find the quote that is at the sorted quotes at that index. Then I can use a for each loop on the provided book's quotes to get a book quote in the closure. Then we can check to see if the quote ID is equal to the book quote ID. And if so, then we can issue the model context delete function on that quote. The changing status bug was identified by several people. First, I believe it was David Burgum, and also by John Doe, although I question that's his real name. John also offered a solution, but I'm going to show you what I came up with. I introduced a first view property, and that is actually useless as my logic was all wrong. So I'm going to delete that property. And then down in my onChange method, watching that status, I'm going to remove all references here too, the if clause and the setting. Instead, where we define our state property for status, I'm going to remove the initialization of the onShelf case and just specify that it's a private state variable of type status. Next, when I create an initializer, I still only want to accept a book parameter from the call site. So I'm going to create an initializer where we're passing in a book, and then I can set the self.book to that passed in book. But now that I have the book, I can assign a value to my state status property. And to do this, I provide an underscore status, and I make it equal to a state property, and then provide an initial value, which is a status type derived from the raw value provided by the book status. And we'll have to unwrap that. And then in the onAppear block, I can remove that assignment to the status. Well, this now then won't trigger any updates when the view loads. Well, there are some other things to change here as well in the group box where we display our date pickers. For the date added picker, we'll need to check what the current status is so that I can use a switch statement inside the labeled content. So I'll switch on status. In the case where it's on shelf, our date picker is the one that we had used already. So I can just move that here. The other two cases are going to use the same date picker. So I'm going to combine the two cases into one, so a case of in progress and completed. But here we'll need to specify a range where we'll stop at the date started for our initial date. So range will be in up to date started. The second and third date pickers are fine. No changes are required. And then the third bug that was identified was by Tim Mitra from More Than Just Code podcast. Tim discovered that if you try to archive your project, like I'm doing here, when you try and submit the app to an app store, you're going to find that it fails. It can't find my preview. Now, I thought I was being smart by putting all of my preview content in that preview content folder. And it works for previews, but when you try to build for submission, it can't find that target, so the preview raises an exception. So I'm going to solve this issue simply by creating a folder in my main project, and I'm going to call my folder previews, and I'll simply move those 3 files into that folder. And then when I archive my project, we'll find that it archives just fine. Now on to the feature that was requested by many, and that was to provide the ability to add and store images in SwiftData, and to ensure that if you have CloudKit enabled, like we do, make sure that it's also synced there too for all of our devices. Well, actually, it's quite simple. In SwiftUI, there is a Photos UI framework that was introduced in iOS 16. I've got an entire video on that topic, so I'll not go into too much detail here. If you want more information, I encourage you to watch that video. Unfortunately, this doesn't allow us to use a camera or pick my images by taking a photo. For that, you'd have to use an AV Foundation framework or the UIKit's image picker. As that's not the point of this video, I'm going to stick with picking a photo from our Photos album. Now, no matter how you get the photo, you can store it in SwiftData. So the first thing I'm going to do is build the user interface for this before I hook it up to SwiftData. So you'll need to import Photos UI. Well, as I outlined in the video I referenced, you'll need 2 properties. One for the item that is selected from the PhotosPicker, and another one that will contain the data from that item. So we'll create 2 state properties for our book cover. The first one will represent the PhotosPicker item. And so we'll call it selected book cover, and I'm going to make it an optional PhotosPicker item. And then the second will be another optional state property that I'll call selected book cover data that will also be optional as a data type. To display and allow me to choose this item, I'm going to place it to the left of the first 3 fields here, the rating, title, and author sections. So to do this, I'm going to first embed the 3 labels in a VStack. And then I'm going to embed that VStack in an HStack. And then let me collapse the VStack in the HStack so that I can focus on creating our picker. So as the first element in the HStack, I'm going to create a PhotosPicker using the selection, matching, photos library, and label overload. Then I'll use Control-M to separate these onto separate lines. Makes it easier to read. For the selection, we'll be bound to our selected book cover. Well, we only want images, so matching will be the case.images. And the photo library will be our shared library. And then we can hit enter to create our closure to create our PhotoPicker. Well, for the label, we'll want to display an SF symbol of a photo if an image has not been selected. But when one has, I want to display the selected image. We can check if we have the data from our PhotosPicker assigned, and I'll show you how to do that shortly, by using an if let. And then I can use another let to see if the data allows us to create a UI image from the selected book cover data that we just got. And then if that's the case, we can display an image using the UI image. And I'm going to make it resizable and scale to fit. Now nothing's showing up because, well, we haven't picked one. So this will be the else case. So I want to display an image using the system name photo. I'll make it resizable and scale to fit. And I'm going to set the tint to primary so that it'll be black in light mode and white in dark mode. Now, of course, I want to apply a frame to both of these, and I want that frame to be the same, so I need to enclose that if-else clause within a group and set the frame on a group. So I'll set a frame that is a width of 75 and a height of 100, which is pretty close to the dimensions of a typical book cover. And since it'll scale to fit, it won't matter what the size of our image is. Now then, when I tap on the image here in the preview, it brings up a PhotoPicker, and you see the images stored in the preview simulator. Well, I still need to be able to apply the selected image to the image though. So that's the next piece of the puzzle. Before I do that though, I also want to be able to clear the cover image if I have one selected. So for this, I'm going to apply an overlay to the entire group, and I'm going to set the alignment of bottom trailing. And then in the overlay, I can check to see if the selected book cover data is not nil, meaning that we have yet to select an image. And if that's the case, I'm going to create a button, and the label, I'm going to use a system image of x.circle.fill, and I'll set the style to red. And then for the action to clear the photo, I'll simply set both the selected book cover data and the selected book cover to nil. The final part of the UI then is to watch for changes on the selected book cover. And then if that's the case, then we can try to get the data from that picker and convert it so that we can apply it to our selected book cover data. Now this function is asynchronous, but we can combine an onChange with a task unit of work by using a task with an ID that is an item we are watching, which is our selected book cover, the PhotosPicker item. So after the onAppear function, create a task method with the ID being the selected book cover. Then within the body, we can check to see if the data can be extracted. So if let data equals by using an optional try to await the selected book cover's load transferable method for the type data.self. If that's successful, then we can set the selected book cover data to that data that's been retrieved. Well, I can test this in the preview now. If I tap on an image, the image picker appears, and I can select an image. And this will replace the placeholder, and the clear button appears. If I tap on the clear button, it'll remove the image. If I tap again, I can choose a different image. I don't really need to clear the image though. I could just as easily have selected another image to replace it. You only need to clear if you want to remove the image altogether. Well, this is only working in the preview. We need to be able to store the selected image in our database. And instead of storing the image, we can store the data, and this will be stored as a blob in a SQLite database. Since we don't have an image when we first create our book, then we can create an optional property in our book entity model in SwiftData. So I'm going to open the book model and I'll create a new property called book cover that will be that optional data type. And since it's optional, we don't need to add it to our initializer. It'll just be nil when we create a new book. However, when we add or change it, we want to update the instance of our book that we're working on, which we'll do shortly. Before I do that, however, if you store all of your data for all of your book images directly in your SQLite database that's used for SwiftData, it won't be long before your data store gets bloated and likely things will start to slow down and you might run into issues. Well, both SwiftData and Core Data have an option that lets you store the object as a reference only, and then it stores the actual image locally in some hidden folder. All we have to do to enable that is to provide an attribute macro for this property and specify that it is external storage. And the beauty of this is that it will also store it in your CloudKit repo as well as an asset. So all we have to do to fix this up now is to return to our edit book view, and we'll check to see if that property has been changed, and if so, update it. So first, in the onAppear block, we'll set the selected book cover data's state property to the book covers property. So it'll either be nil or it'll be the last image that was assigned. In the computed change property, though, when we make another selection, I'll add another check to see if the selected book cover data is not equal to the assigned book cover as another OR statement. And then finally, in the toolbar action for the updated item, we'll need to set the book's book cover property to that selected book cover data, and then SwiftData will automatically update it. And this only gets triggered if changed is true. And then just one final thing here for display purposes, I want to change the padding here from just being horizontal to on all sides. That's better. Well, now the moment of truth. Well, I could test the local and CloudKit application here on my device or on the simulator. To test on a simulator like I have here, you'll have to go to the simulator settings and make sure you're logged in with a valid iCloud account. So you can see here that I am logged in as myself. This particular simulator is new and it doesn't have the app installed on it yet. So if everything's been done correctly and I haven't broken anything, we should connect on first launch and download the current state as we had left it in our last video from my iCloud account. So let's try that. Upon launch, you see all sorts of activity in the console, which is good, meaning we're communicating with CloudKit. And then shortly after launch, the data is pulled down and our list view is refreshed. Great. At least we haven't broken anything. So let's test the adding images functionality that we just created. I'll select this first book here, and let me tap on the image to load the picker. This time you see all of the images in My Photos shared library. A lot of crap here, but whatever. Let me select this one. The update button becomes active, so let me update it. If I return to the view, I see it's there. So let me change it to something else and update. Now let me stop and relaunch the application. If I return to that book, I see the images persisted. Great. Let me add one more image to this book here. Now hopefully after updating the app, it's done two things. First, it's updated the local repository and stored those images, and it's also updated the CloudKit version so that if I access from another device, I'm going to be able to see the same thing. It'll get updated. Well, we can check out that by simply deleting the app from the simulator. And this will delete the local version and its data so that if I run it again, it'll be like launching on another device. So let's do that. Now when I launch again, We have to wait for that data to get pulled down once more. Once it's pulled down, let me check my books with covers. And you'll see that the images are there too. It looks like it's working. Well, it will only pull data or receive data if there are changes, so it must have stored those images in our local repository. Well, you may recall that we print the location of the SQLite database to the console. So I can select that string and then use the Services menu to run the Open command to find the location in the Finder. Here is my Books file, and I'll double-click on it, and it'll open in the DB browser application that we referred to in an earlier video. So I'm going to browse the data now and check out our Books table. If I inspect the properties, though, I see that there is the new book cover column, and 2 of them have blobs in them representing the data for our images. Remember, I only updated 2 of my 3 books. Now, if I inspect these properties, though, I see that they're only taking up 38 bytes each. Now, there's no way those images are that small. So this is really just a reference pointing to a location somewhere where it's storing those files locally. So let me return to the Finder, and I'm going to inspect this application support directory, and I'm going to use Command-Shift period to reveal any hidden folders. And indeed, we see this new support folder. And if I open it, I see external data. And then if I check it out, I see that there are 2 files, but I don't recognize them. However, if I add an extension to one of them, for example, let me add .jpg for JPEG, and as soon as I do that, it's recognized this image data and provides me the image that it's representing. That's great. There's my images. So let me just remove that now. So that really completes this series now, and I hope that I've been able to answer everyone's questions and fixed identified bugs. This is just the beginning for SwiftData, and over the years, it'll add more features and be up to par with core data. In the meantime, though, you can still do an awful lot with it. So thanks again to everyone who reached out with bugs and suggestions. If you've enjoyed this series, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. Be sure that you subscribe to my channel and set up notifications so that you'll know when new videos drop. And if you want early access to all of my content, you can become a $5 monthly coffee subscriber. Thanks for watching.